Hello, everyone. John Adkison here again, doing another interview for the Circumcision Harms docu-series, circumcision in quotes. And today I have Walter with me. Walter, please introduce yourself and tell us about how you got here.
Well, my name is Walter Fletcher, and about 7 or 8 years ago, I came across bloodstained men, and I started researching and realized that a lot of the problems that I've had were connected to circumcision. And it made me decide that I wanted to make a change. So I got involved. I've actually done protests with the bloodstained men. I've met Brother K.
Awesome.
I've gotten pictures with him. I've met James Lowen. I've actually been to Washington, which I'm near because I live in Maryland, and done a lot of work with like the Genital Integrity Awareness Week with also
David Wilson.
Yeah, David Wilson. Um, and I'm currently trying to make my own campaign that I'm working on called the Campaign to End Child Genital Mutilation. It's also on Facebook.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'll have to jump onto that. That's great. I don't know if you've heard, but there's actually a lawsuit that was filed against the AAP just a few days ago.
Nah.
Yep. I've been sharing it around in a couple groups on Facebook. So I'll try to remember to make sure you get that. I've been thinking about going out and actually messaging people because a lot of people miss things on Facebook.
Yeah, usually I try and keep up on it. I mean, I look to see what's going on with like Brother K and all. And I mean, right now I also posted about the Stop FGM law that got signed into that the bill that got signed into law
by Trump,
and how that still violates equal protection clause.
Yeah.
And trying to keep up on Twitter and all that.
Okay. Well, your story sounds similar to mine. I was 35 years old when I became a dad, and I never really thought about the issue. Never, this is 15 years ago, over 15 years ago, and there weren't bloodstained men out protesting, and I didn't see it on the news or anything. So after becoming a dad and started down that rabbit hole, which turned out to be a lot deeper than I ever imagined, I started realizing how I'm harmed by it. So part of the reason what led me to do this is that I learned piece by piece by piece by piece over many years about the ways that I'm harmed and what I'm missing out on, and it took a lot of time to kind of connect the dots, right? Okay, it's like, so this part is missing or whatever, so that's why I was having this effect or whatever, and I thought it was normal because I was practically born with it. I have no frame of reference to what it would be like to have a normal penis.
Right. When it was me, ever since puberty, I've been having issues. I would be, when I get aroused, it'd be very tight, and I would end up getting like little rips in the skin.
Wow.
And upon reading all the different problems, I noticed that there are ones that have to do with when they take too much skin.
Yep.
And that's pretty much what was going on with me. I realized that that's what happened.
Yeah.
And I still have to deal with all that currently today. And I've even had surgery to try and fix the issues.
Yeah.
And it got rid of a common problem, turkey necking.
Mm-hmm.
When you have the scrotum is connected pretty much almost all the way up to the neck of the right near the glands.
Or scrotal webbing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And got that taken care of, but it still had some issues where it didn't fully fix it.
Yeah.
And I have to live with the way it is right now. But I'm wanting to fight to make sure that it doesn't happen to any other kids. Yeah. And I've actually had some success. I've had people tell me that they decided not to because of the information I've given. And of course, we made sure to keep my son, our son, it's his choice, it's his body.
Yeah.
So we're not gonna do anything and let him decide.
So when you started dealing with this when you were a teenager, did anyone explain to you that this is a result of circumcision?
No, I pretty much lived in a house where nobody wanted to talk about anything, which kind of is ironic because my mother told me I should have came to her when I had issues. But my household was so anti-sex talk. I wasn't even allowed to have art books because they had nudity in them. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
But when I had that surgery to fix the issue, even the urologist that was looking at it said you could tell that there was something wrong. My parents should have been able to figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the normal scar, but the scar is supposed to be in a complete round circle.
Yeah.
Mine actually dipped down, connected to the rafe, and then came back up. It's almost like if it would be a teardrop. Wow. Kind of, and he said that they really should have known that there was something wrong when I left the hospital that day.
Even physicals with the doctor, you would think that they would notice that.
Yeah, nobody said anything.
I don't know. Maybe you'd have to have an erection for it to be noticeable. I don't know.
That's possible.
All right. Yeah. So sad. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a whole outline of topics that I cover. And the first aspect I go into is about the physical aspects of harm for male circumcision.
Right.
Not trying to be, not trying to just cover males. We'll cover females and intersex a little bit too, and how it all intertwines. But most people have heard at least the worst kind of worst type of female genital cutting. So, and then I'll get into how these problems affect partnerships, sexual partnerships. And then psychological impacts, again, not just on guys like you and I that are cut, but on everyone else too, our parents, medical professionals, and those of us like you and I that are advocating for children's rights to genital autonomy. And then I'll get into relationships, how it affects dynamics in relationships between everyone, child parents, co-parenting, pedophilia, doctor-patient, and friends and family, even coworkers sometimes. And then I'll cover the FGM and intersex normalization stuff a little bit. And then social productivity, how this all affects social productivity worldwide.
Okay.
And then the very last thing I get into, I added this recently, it's about forced retraction because of people not knowing. So I've got this little
prop.
Exactly. Mock penis. One Caitlin, I think it's Caitlin, was it Caitlin V? Yeah, Caitlin V, she's got a YouTube channel. She actually showed a dildo and I guess got in trouble with YouTube for it. Hopefully they never pick on me about this.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's just yarn in the shape. Yeah. Anyways, so the first word I'd like to cover is the acropostion. And John Geisker from Doctors Opposing Circumcision did a presentation for me at a baby expo, and one of the images I popped up in the thing was an image of a statue. I think it was a Greek statue, intact man, and you could see it was intact, not the mushroom head, but all the skin coming out over the end of his penis, and actually the end of his penis was the acropostion, the part that bunches up and hangs off the end, right about that much. And supposedly that's all that was cut off in early biblical times, and it was changed somewhere around
Right.
130
The
AD.
brit milah versus the brit priah.
Exactly. And in Jewish texts, they even say, lay bare the glands. So awesome, nice book. I think I've got that up there on my shelf too. Yeah, so instead of just cutting off the end, they now cut off everything and completely lay bare the glands.
Right. Did he tell you why they did that?
Yeah, because it's in the American Circumcision documentary too, but it's about the guys would go out and do sports games in the nude, and the Jewish men would hang weights on their skin to stretch it out, so they would cover the glands better because it was thought of as.
I heard weights, or they would tie the end.
Yeah. If I could just see that, taking some string and tying off it. Yeah, because so the Jewish men felt bad about having the glands hanging out. So that's why the rabbis got the idea. Well, let's cut off some more so they can't get away with that. And here we are today with who knows how many thousands of men doing restoration, basically what they were doing back then, hanging weights off their penis or whatever. You can go to norm.org or look up TLC Tugger, and there's just lots of tools out there for doing that now, and many men are doing it.
Yeah, I've actually gotten myself one, and for a while it was working, but it also caused me a few issues because I don't have that much to work with.
Yeah,
in way of skin.
like it. Yeah. And my problem with the tools is you grab a hold of the skin and just kind of hang it there, and you're pulling on all the skin, including your scrotum and everything else. And for me, I have a high and tight myself, but I have, I think, pretty much all my inner mucosa, but I have very small amount of shaft skin. And
Right.
the only part that I would want to stretch is just the shaft skin. I would not want to stretch the mucosal area out at all.
Right.
So I would need to be able to, do this somehow, pull both ways. And the penis is such a mobile body part. I mean, it shrinks and expands, and it does throughout the day, depending on the temperature or who knows what. So,
Right.
putting on a static tool like that, I just don't see how you could make that work.
Thank you, Austin. Well, the only thing that I was saying was that I knew that they would tie. I didn't know about the weights, but we were also talking about how the tuggers and all weren't really getting the skin area that you were you think would be best targeted.
Yeah. So I don't know how that would work. Who knows? Maybe someone will invent something sometime, or who knows? Maybe Fortune will figure something out too.
Yeah, I actually met the guy who started Forgen when he had his show up in Philadelphia.
Sweet.
There's pictures of it on one of my accounts.
Sweet. Okay. All right. So one of the things that we know, even through scientific testing, is that the skin is skin. It's innervated. It's vascularized. Yes, it is sensitive. It's not like clipping fingernails or cutting hair, like some people actually compare it to.
Right.
And it does not grow back. It is an amputation. Even the AP uses the word amputation. I don't know why we needed studies to prove that. It's like ask intact men. And even the AP themselves, first policy, I think in like 1971, is there to protect the glands. How about that? Has that changed somehow? I mean, why do they not continue to have that in their policy? I don't know. And unlike, some people compare it to like your eyelid, right? One side is
Right.
mucosal and one side is not. You have an inner mucosal side to it, and you've got the outer skin. But it's different. It's a lot like a turtleneck. Some people use that word to shame intact men or whatever, but
Right.
it's actually a very good representation. Imagine cutting the skin off of a turtle's neck. It just would be, that'd be wrong.
Yeah.
Horrible. So as you can see here, it's kind of represents it. As you can see, it's unfolding down the way. And that provides a rolling mechanism. Anyone that's an engineer or mechanic, they can see, you know, that this definitely works differently, right? What kind of a career have you been in?
I am actually a rideshare driver,
Oh, me too. I think you said that.
and yeah, and I actually have on the back of one of my seats the QR code to my campaign
Ah,
page. So every now and then I get good discussions in my car.
awesome. Yeah, I've been an IT guy most of my life, corporate IT guy, but past year and a half, since I've been dealing with family health issues, I decided to do something that's more flexible,
Yeah.
even though it doesn't pay nearly as much. Um, but yeah, I've had lots of conversations because I have stickers and stuff on my car too. So anyways, that rolling mechanism definitely makes things with sex very different because you have less friction and all that. As you can see,
Right.
I'm sliding the penis into or through my fist or my hands without any dragging on the fingers.
The lubricating motion, smooth gliding action.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everyone knows that, you know, the skin on the penis isn't attached to the underside, like,
Right.
you know, like skin is attached to your finger or your arm or whatever. It's kind of a little more like this, right? I think David Atkinson was one that shared that view. But yeah, it's like it's very unique. It glides,
Mhm.
and because it's a mucosal membrane, both the glands and the inner mucosa, it's moist. It's
Yes.
lubrication, similar to what's in a vagina, right? So
Mhm.
the guy gets to bring lubrication to the game. How awesome would that be? Less likely to need to use KY jelly. And what always gets hurt one way or another, well, yeah, always gets hurt one way or another is a frenulum, right? That's the
Yeah, I
part
have a
that
scar where mine used to be.
really, um, yeah. So typically the frenulum, if you look at an intact penis, it stretches all the way down and grabs a hold of the inner mucosal part of the foreskin or the prepuce, and that it kind of like underneath your tongue, it pulls it back as the penis retracts back down. It keeps the skin back up on top of the glands. That way, the glands is always covered,
Mhm.
and that gets cut in a variety of ways depending on the tool that's used. They pretty much always have to reach in and snip it this way, right, in order to disconnect it so the inner mucosa doesn't try to go back up to the glands, especially during childhood, because the inner mucosa and the glands are actually adhered. They're
Mhm.
kind of like your fingernail. It slowly separates over time as you go to, towards puberty and sometimes even later. But it also gets affected by the cut. And you've got various different tools that are used, various different methods that are used. You start off with thinking about the Jewish barzel, or it's just the thing that slides over the foreskin, and
Mhm.
it slides in between, and then they just take a knife and slice it off, right?
I actually have a Gomco clamp and
Oh,
a
do you?
circumcision kit so I can show people.
Yeah, yeah. I recently James Owen recently sent me some stuff, so I have plans to do some videos on that too.
I also
Um,
have a circumstraint.
oh, lovely. Oh, so anyways, and then you have the Mogen clamp that's similar to the barzel, but they pull the skin up and then they slide the Mogen clamp on, and then they close it off, and they turn a little thing that hold it in place. And the idea of that versus the barzel is that it causes the skin, the blood to coagulate before they cut, and then you have you don't have as much bleeding afterwards, less chance of bleeding out.
Oh, here we go.
That was weird. That just happened real fast. So yeah, I was saying about the Mogen clamp, about how they clamp it off and coagulates the blood before they cut. But also the Mogen clamp has some issues, like harming the glands if they squeeze it too close. They're dealing with it, a very tiny little penis, so it's kind of risky and dangerous. In fact, Mogen clamp, the business, got sued out of existence because of all the botches that occurred. So they came up with other tools like the Gomco clamp, like you were saying, and the Plastibell. And in both cases, those fit over the glands, and then they cut down lower. So here's the problem. I'm pretty sure I was cut with the Mogen clamp, so where they pulled the skin up. That way, my intermucosal layer, which was on my glands at the time before they got cut, remained, and then they pulled it down afterwards, right? So I have a good bit of intermucosa. You look at other men, you'll see that mucosal layer area is a lot smaller, and typically, as far as I can't imagine anything else that would cause that other than a Plastibell or a Gomco clamp, because they're sticking a bell down, and so the cut happens lower down the glands. Problem is all this is frenulum area, right? So you're cutting off more of the frenulum area when you're using a Plastibell or a Gomco clamp. And then there are cases where men, where the butcher, whoever, you call them a surgeon or whatever if you want to, they cut right up underneath the corona. Yeah, and sliced all that out. And as we know from the Sorrells study, that's all very, very sensitive area.
Yeah.
And even intact men will attest to that. One guy from Canadian Foreskin Awareness Program, I think a project, showed up on the American Circumcision documentary and talked about how he could just manipulate the frenulum area to get an orgasm.
Yeah.
And I never really considered that. I never really thought about, how things worked in detail with my penis until I started studying this stuff. And now I pay attention. It's like, ooh, that really is kind of a hot spot right there.
Everybody needs to learn more about their bodies. They need to have better education in schools and all.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're not teaching these details in high school sex ed for sure.
I mean, going on like the anatomy of women, there's times when I have to explain that what people call the clitoris is actually the glans clitoris.
Yeah.
That the whole organ is they can't cut the whole organ out unless they sedate and do an actual major surgery.
Yeah. Yeah. When you look at how the genitalia is formed from birth, you realize that it's really all the same parts. It's just different size, and instead of having a pole, you have a hole, right? And the what's inside the penis, which goes all the way back to the anus, that's the corpus cavernosum. Females have the same thing. It's two pieces, right? You got the right and left. Females, it just opens up and goes around the vagina. Okay. So the last part that is removed, and probably would have been removed even when just the acropation was ablated, is the ridged band. And I've been heard men refer to this, compare this to your lips. And I've heard intact men talk about how, like, it's, you look at a baby's penis, that's intact, and you can see how it closes off near the end, right? And kind of creates like a one-way sphincter. Lets things out, doesn't let things back in. That's through like a musculature thing. But for a man, when they start becoming erect and that starts rolling down the glands and spreading out to go around the glands, that's an erogenous feeling in itself.
Not only that, but it's what they, from what I understand, what they stylized ribbed for her pleasure condoms after.
Yeah, thanks for getting that. I haven't been thinking about that part. Yeah, it's kind of like ribbed condoms. Yes, absolutely. So all these things missing leads to lots of various issues. And the number one thing, it sounds like you have a more severe level of this than I do, and that's a hairy shaft because of scrotal webbing. So when you don't have your prepuce to roll down your penis, instead, as it becomes erect, it brings the scrotum up with it.
Right.
And thus you have scrotum on your shaft instead of what's supposed to be there. And since it's bringing the scrotum up with it, it's bringing the testes up with it too. And I've seen this in many cases. You can see this on porn if you look at it in a porn. You'll see the testes up on the sides of the guy's shaft. So definitely a circumcised penis in that case. And that's not very comfortable. I mean, having your testes squeezed a little bit. I mean, it's not like not as bad as getting kicked in the butt nuts, but it's not exactly comfortable. And in my case, when I was in my teens and 20s, it was so bad that one of my testes would get pulled into my body. They would like plop inside of my body. And whenever that would happen, I had to stop and relax things and gently push it back out. And then kind of have to like mind over matter, control my erection so it doesn't get so tight in the.
Oh yeah, I've had the hiding testicle before.
Oh yeah, all right. So you're the second person I've interviewed so far now that's testified to that. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many men have experienced that. There's actually, I guess there's a chart on circumcisionharm.org that lists all these different side effects that guys have that, and as far as percentages of reports, and it's pretty stunning to see how often this kind of thing happens. And then on the opposite side, so you got the bottom of the penis here, where the scrotum is, and the scrotum and the frenulum area and all that. Then you have the upper part that goes towards your stomach, the bottom of your pelvic floor.
Right.
And for me, when I get an erection, my penis will start curving upward up towards my stomach. The tighter that it gets, the more that it goes towards the stomach. In fact, I could. I mean, it kind of seems funny, but it's like I could flex my muscle down there per se and make it, smack my stomach if I wanted to.
I mean, part of the problem that I had in puberty is that, let's see, it would curve to the side a little bit. And as I grew up and things stretched, it did correct itself. But for most of the time, it would actually curve to one side.
Yep. And you see that in porn too. You see penises that are curved a little bit when they have an erection. It's not that complicated to figure out how that happened. It's like, okay, well, whoever did it, they probably, they didn't keep the penis perfectly straight, and they didn't, it's got to be if you do woodwork or metalworking, whatever, it's like you got to make sure you got a perfectly 90-degree angle, right? Kind of hard to do when you're dealing with a little penis like that, and you end up cutting off too much on one side, and then you end up having the curved penis. And for me, it's one thing to bend it this way, right? And the more engorged my penis becomes, the more engorged the corpus cavernosum gets filled with, the harder it gets, right? So it's not supposed to bend. It's supposed to be straight out. Well, here's the problem though. When having sex with someone that is expecting to be able to do certain positions because they've been with an intact guy or a guy it wasn't cut so tight. You end up with like double kink, right? Because they're trying to bend your penis
Right.
down again, and that it's like, no, can't go that far. Gotta stop them. And then there's myelostenosis. This supposedly occurs a lot, like a third or something like that. It's a big number, big percentage. It's not a severe, at least it wasn't for me, it wasn't a severe issue. But so the stenosis, they talk about how the meatus gets smaller. It squeezes closed a little bit because of buildup of tissue and all that around there. But for me, I actually had a little bridge that jumped across, just a tiny little bit of skin that jumped across, and when I urinate, my pee would go all over the place. And my grandmother, I'm thinking I was like 8 years old. My grandmother just wouldn't have it, and it's like, okay, I'll just take you to the doctor. And she took me to the doctor. I was just visiting her for like a short while during the summer break or something. And the doctor looked and was like, oh yeah, you got a little skin bridge there. Let's take a little knife to it and just cut it real quick, and done. No more problems. It didn't hurt.
Just took a knife to it.
Yeah, just took a scalpel to it real quick, and yeah, I mean it's scar tissue, so it's not like it had nerves in it or anything. I don't remember it feeling hurting or anything. And I was kind of happy that was done over with, but yeah.
I mean, for an 8-year-old to see somebody coming at you with a knife in that area, that had to be.
Yeah, I have very vivid memory of it for sure. The whole shebang, and my grandmother not being happy about it, about the urinating and all that. So it stuck with me. I didn't connect it until someone explained to me what myelostenosis was. But there's, I think that I probably still live with a certain level of myelostenosis where my ureter right there is a little close, a little smaller than it should be. But again, I've lived with it all my life, so like I'm not gonna go get surgery or anything over it. It doesn't hurt, badly enough to care that much about it. But again, we shouldn't have to be dealing with this sort of thing.
Right.
And then there's skin bridges that occur sometimes. And that occurs because the inner mucosa is supposed to be attached to the glands during childhood, and the body's like, whoa, let's fix this. And if the caretaker doesn't make sure there's plenty of Vaseline or whatever put on the glands while recovery is going on, and the penis just happens to relax just enough or whatever, and the inner mucosa comes in contact with the glands, and then it tries to repair itself with scar tissue. And then when it comes back down, so you got this bridge that jumps across the corona down to the inner mucosa. And you have,
I've seen many pictures of that.
Yeah. Guys have to take Q-tips to clean out underneath. It's like, okay, we're doing this for hygiene reasons, you say? This doesn't sound very hygienic to me. Definitely more work than just pulling back the prepuce and rinsing it off, scrubbing it a little bit maybe. I always make this joke. It's like, who the heck doesn't enjoy cleaning their genitalia? Okay, and then we have erectile dysfunction. You're missing a large percentage of your sensitive tissue, erogenous tissue. So, well, maybe that's a physical thing that's causing it, right? But hey, biggest sexual organ we have is our brain, right?
That is true.
And if we're thinking, well, this really sucks to be missing out on this or that or whatever, I hate my penis or whatever, well, that could be a turn off. So it's going to be even harder to get an erection when that's going on. And then there's premature ejaculation. I added this one recently because someone kind of helped me realize this. It's like, okay, so if the frenulum is like the hot spot, and different guys have different amounts of prep use, but if your frenulum is inside there and it's being protected by the inner mucosa and it's not touching, the vagina or anything yet, you're less likely to have premature ejaculation. Because Mother Nature was thinking this through, right? Like, you don't want to ejaculate until you're inside the vagina and close to that uterus, right? So you go that far in, and now the frenulum is touching things and getting started and getting things rolling there and ejaculation. Whereas instead, if you have that frenulum exposed, as soon as you touch the vagina, that might be too much to handle, and whammo, ejaculation before things even get going.
Not only that, but sometimes the scars become really sensitive, and you get more sensation. I hate to say it that way because some people will be like, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I know.
But the scar may give you sensation, which will also lead to premature.
Yeah.
And if you have everything intact, you don't have to thrust so hard. You could take your time, you could really enjoy it. And but if you don't have all the feeling, you're going to try and get all the feeling you can. So you're going to work at it a lot harder.
Yeah. Some guys think that they're going to last longer because they don't have that extra sensation, when it's actually
the opposite.
Yeah, flip-flop. I think there's this misconception that, okay, it's going to be less sensitive. No, I kind of think of it like this way. Okay, if I cut off my finger here, is my hand going to be less sensitive? No, I'm going to have less hand.
No, but I do try and do if you want to know the difference, go like this and then like this, and you'll know the difference between the sensation.
Yeah, the Meissner's corpuscles, the light touch versus the the deeper touch. Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry if I'm getting you all out of construed.
No, that's perfect. Okay, so then the last thing is general botches, period. We were discussing one earlier about how this can be too short on one side and end up having penis like curves one way or the other. And also I referred to the Mogen Clamp earlier about how things get clamped off and you end up cutting away the glands or leaving marks on the glands or whatever.
Then you also got David Reimer.
Oh yes, exactly.
And also all the kids that die from it because they hemorrhage out.
Yep. 100-some babies a year, it seems, in the United States die from complications from this, whether it's from blood loss,
Infection.
The lungs bursting or heart bursting. I mean, and who knows? This might be happening far often than we even know, because they aren't required to say that it happened during circumcision, right? They can say, "Oh, well, the baby had a defective heart," right off as that. I mean, the doctors are compelled to do that, to say something like that, because they don't want to increase the chances that they'll get sued for how bad of a job they did during circumcision or whatever,
right?
Or that they didn't check for hemophilia or something like that. Yeah. And with David Reimer, it was I guess the electrocautery tool that they were using to do the cutting was the dial got bumped or whatever, and it turned it up too high, and it caused the whole penis to get totally damaged.
Yeah. I will give props to Law and Order SVU because they kind of used his story in one of their episodes.
Really?
Yeah, they actually had a thing where there were twins. One was being raised as a girl and didn't know that
Yeah.
She was born a boy,
Exactly.
and that was what happened. That's what why they said that they were being raised that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give props to Law and Order for taking something that really, well, they always take a lot of things that really happen in life and put it in there. But SVU actually did that.
Yeah, and you know, I think that a lot of mainstream media avoids just calling this straight out just straight because they are too afraid of being called anti-Semitic or whatever.
Well, every time I hear something like that, and I had to do this earlier today on Twitter, whenever somebody calls us anti-Semitic, I ask them, well, then do you believe that there are sects of Islam that should be able to cut girls? Because right now we have laws that protect the girls.
Yeah.
Isn't that anti-Islamic?
Yeah.
Then
Exactly. Islamophobic or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of hypocrisy and double standards on this topic, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, so any other physical attributes that you think I missed?
no, I mean, there's always the loss of sensation around the glands because the glands are now unprotected and they keratinize instead of having the smooth, shiny look that they're supposed to have.
Yeah.
They have that like coarse, raggedy, dull look of men who have been cut.
Yeah.
Pretty much that's about it at this moment that I can think of.
Yeah, even men that have done restoration, they said that, you know, as their glands start getting more and more covered, things become more and more sensitive on the glands again. So there was one YouTube video, I probably still have it in my playlist or something. One guy, intact guy, that's what he did to do a little experiment. He did auto circumcision is what it's called. He pulled things out and left his glands out in the open for a while. And he said, "Oh my gosh, that was horrible." So it's absolutely horrible what they're doing to boys, and yeah.
I remember reading about one guy who got circumcision done later on in life, and he was like, it went from seeing color to black and white. It was like a whole spectrum of feelings, and now it's just black and white.
Yeah. Nikos Koustouras, he was on the American Circumcision documentary. He used those words, color to black and white. So and he's got accounts both on Facebook and on Twitter. Nikos anti-MGM and stuff like that.
Yeah, I follow him too, along with you.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good to have. I've been wanting to try to get him in an interview too, because I mean he did show up on the documentary, but he didn't go into a whole lot of details about all this stuff. So it would be interesting to hear from him. Okay, so all of these physical attributes lead to issues with sexual relationships, sexual partnerships, right? First thing being the heterosexual sex, penis to vagina, right? And I actually did a video on this. I came up with a wise idea of taking a glove. I was going to do a rubber band, but I ended up doing a rubber glove, and I showed people just try to stick your finger inside your fist. It's not very easy. You feel the friction right away. You start bumping up into things and start pulling the skin on both your finger as well as on inside your fist. It's not comfortable. If you take and then I stuck a piece of tape, double-sided tape, on the tip of my finger, and stuck the glove on there. And then I put a little bit of Vaseline, just a little bit of lubrication on the end, and then roll up to double it up over that part to replicate the penis. And then just went like flip, like that. It's like, okay, people, you might not believe what I just did, but try it at home. This is safe to try at home. Do not be afraid. It's not going to hurt you. So that's the way I see it, and personally, I've had a couple times with my partners where get too excited, too much of a rush, whatever, and jump into it, and I end up tearing her because I'm really hard and she's not all lubricated yet, and I end up tearing her labia or whatever, that area, because you kind of have to spread things out to reach the lubricated area. And
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I end up getting the rips myself.
yeah. Yeah, you're the second person that's told me about another woman testified recently about a partner that was Muslim who tore regularly, and he was so used to it he didn't know any better. Like that's wow. I I think I would have thought about that one myself, but yeah. So yeah, having that rolling mechanism and having that lubrication would have been very nice to have in those cases. Now I've just learned to take my time and make sure everything is lubricated before I jump on that bandwagon. So, and then same thing with anal. Anal, you don't have any lubrication. As far as I've seen, every time that anyone does it, anal, they always involve some lubrication to get started. Whereas in type men might not necessarily have to do that, right? Especially if they have some, a little bit of overhang or a little bit of coverage, and they have that rolling mechanism to just glide right on in there.
Yep.
And then the last thing is homosexual docking. I like to pick on Jim Jeffries on this one. Maybe someday Jim Jeffries will hear about this video and decide one of these mini videos where I call him out. I actually went and protested in front of a couple of his venues with a bunch
Yeah,
of
I was planning on doing that one time when he came to our town, but I needed to work.
Oh, bummer. Yeah. But yeah, he actually talked about homosexual docking, and he made the movements with his body and everything to talk about it. And I think I think he was mocking it. It was kind of distasteful, but he was also mocking the intactivists, particularly anal Cerrone in Israel. But yeah, if you don't have that prep use, there's just no docking. There's only crossing swords. All right, so then the next section is about the psychological effects. First, there's the trauma from the cut itself. And a lot of people argue that, there's no trauma, or they don't remember, whatever.
But it's actually been shown that it does alter the brain permanently.
Yep. MRI done, and you can look at pictures and stuff like that too, and you also can read plenty of stories about how like Brother K even talks about his story about how he didn't eat for a couple of days and he was lethargic and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people that testify, including myself, to dreams, or nightmares.
Jay, I'm actually looking at buying that.
Are you?
When I get a chance.
Yeah. He testifies to a dream that he's had most of his life, and it took him a long time of analyzing, but he's pretty clear that and he talks about how he figured it out, but he's pretty clear that his nightmare was due to that trauma at the very beginning of his life.
I actually want to get that book, and I also have Unspeakable Mutilations.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep, I've got that one up here somewhere. Oh, here it is, just for the viewers to see.
Yep.
By Lindsay Watson. Oh. Yeah. It's crazy how many books
I actually carry them in my car so that people see them also, and
really?
ask questions. Yeah.
Wow. No one gives you bad marks for that kind of thing or anything?
Oh, I've gotten a few. I've actually had a woman yell and scream at me that it's nothing compared to what's done to girls. And
why do we have to have a pissing contest about this? Why can't we just both agree to say let's end it all?
I think she was the first one I ever gave because I could not stand how she had no empathy. And but most of the time when I have people asking about it, they're wanting to take pictures of the QR code. They're wanting to spread the word because they actually never understood, and I've given them ideas that they've never heard of.
Yeah.
I've talked about how, as you said, it's naturally adhered to the foreskin is naturally adhered to the glands for basically the first decade, and over the first decade it will become naturally able to retract.
Yeah.
Most didn't know that. They were told by their doctor that they had to clean it. I'm like, you
Yeah.
do that, if you retract it, you're ripping it from there, just like you rip a nail from your nail bed. And a lot of them don't even realize that.
Yeah. I often hear the term micro tears, and the idea is that they're like tears that you can not even see with your eyes, but they're just like really tiny little tears all through the glands and probably even through the intermucosal area. And then after all those tears happen, then it all comes back in contact together. This is when I put this together, it really freaked me out when I thought about this. But if it's coming back together and then the body is trying to heal itself and you get scar tissue build up. What's that?
It's going to heal together, but it's also going to have the bacteria.
Yeah. So but what I worry about is that it adheres permanently. Right? I mean, if it's scar tissue, scar tissue is not going to break down like the preputial lamina does.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know what would be worse, not having your prepuce at all or having that happen.
Right.
I haven't. I'd love to come across someone that's had that happen, but who knows? Those probably do happen, and then they probably get fixed before they're old enough to really remember or put it together. And I'm sure that it gets diagnosed usually as phimosis. When I think phimosis is a different thing. I think there's two things, right? You've got the
you got the phimosis and then paraphimosis.
Well, okay. Well, phimosis and paraphimosis I think are related. But I think phimosis is supposed to be like the tightness of the foreskin not opening up to allow for it to roll down, right?
Right.
And then that kind of phimosis could also lead to paraphimosis, because if they do manage to get it down and that skin is tight, then it might get trapped behind the ridge here, right? The coronal ridge. So that would be normal phimosis to me. But I think a lot of doctors misinterpret that adhering to the glands as phimosis.
Oh, yeah.
That's different. That's very different phenomena. And in cases when it's with children, it's actually normal, not a medical indication.
My wife and I already know to not let any doctor mess with my son, well, our son, in that area.
Awesome.
Unless just to check.
Yeah. Someone else told me is like the doctor said that they weren't going to retract, but they still tried to manipulate it just to see the meatus. I was like, no, you don't even need to do that unless there's some sort of obvious thing. I mean, are you going to open up the hymen of a girl look inside? I don't understand the need for that, but I guess it's just the cultural conditioning of seeing the glands exposed all the time just has really gotten deep into people's psyche. All right, so that was the trauma from the cut. Then there's the trauma from the discoveries of the loss or the harm. And for me, as I learned about this piece by piece by piece, I didn't know, I wasn't presented all of this all one time like I'm presenting to other people now. And I actually tried to present all the physical harms to one Islamic guy one time, and his brain shut off before I could. I told him about one aspect or so, and he's like, "Man, really? That really pisses me off. I'd like to have that. That sounds like a great feature to have." And then I started talking to him about another one. I was like, time out. I can't. I'm just so mad. I'm not even hearing you. I'm just. I'm. Oh. So I don't know. I kind of hope that people can watch through these and learn about all the harms quickly. I did make a playlist of a bunch of short little videos where I went through all those physical harms. But yeah, for me, I'm an introvert, so I processed this internally. Each time I learned a little bit and started making connections in my head about how those physical harms affected me in my life and all that. And sometimes that trauma leads to suicide, as you know. Well, David Reamer is one obvious example, but I think that's an extreme situation.
Also, Jonathan Conte.
Yeah, and Alex Hardy. Some of the most popular ones. And there's been 2 interviews I've done already where suicides were involved. One for sure, this was definitely a main cause of his suicide, and for another, she knew that her husband was distressed about it, but didn't know whether that was like the main factor to his suicide. And I'm afraid we've only started to see suicides from this. I think it's going to happen more, unless society turns around a little bit and is more empathetic towards men, and maybe they can get mental health help. Even that book, Circumcision Harm, Jay talks about meeting doctors and individuals about this topic and how he did not get any empathy at all. In fact, he would get chased out of offices. And then we have our children to think about. I have 2 teenage boys myself, and they are very aware of what I do regarding this issue. And their mom also has spoken out plenty of times. She was actually more actively involved in this movement before I was. And I feel bad that they have to see that this world still has something going on in it that's horrific, barbaric. And they choose to join me quite often with protesting and even online some. I've been thinking about who's that girl? Now I'm going blank on her name, but she showed up at the UN and cussed the cussed the people out at the UN. Young girl, what's her name? Greta Thunberg. And I read the story from her dad about how she went through a period where she was depressed, and this is shortly after she learned about the problems on the planet with global climate change. But later she started protesting out on the street and got her spark back, and everyone knows where that led to the UN.
So there are times when I would like to pick out a weekend and go down to Annapolis, because as I said, I live in Maryland, and just ask, have like a sign or something and try and get people thinking, because if you're gonna, equality means everybody is protected equally.
Yeah.
And yet we have laws that only protect one group.
Yeah.
And have people come up to me and ask me, what do I mean? It's good to be vague at times, because then people really want to know what's it about, instead of just seeing what it is and then just walking on by because they don't want to talk about it. There's been a lot of times when I would like to go down to Annapolis and do this in front of the Capitol building that we have down there and all. And the only problem is time.
Yeah, I hear you.
right now I'm the only one who works outside of the house, and I wish I could spend a lot more time doing this and somehow being able to support my family at the same time, but I have to do what I can when I can. My wife supports me on this. Our 11-year-old daughter understands exactly what I'm talking about, and she thinks it's barbaric. She thinks it's wrong. And of course, our son is the intact generation. We're leaving it all up to him.
Yeah.
So
Sweet. Okay. The next section is on medical professionals and the psychological impacts of them. Yeah, I think that a lot of medical professionals learn to shut off their empathy center in their head, so they can focus on doing a good job and all that, and not get too bogged down or burnt out or whatever from seeing all the pain and struggles that people go through and when they're being treated or dying or whatever,
right.
which is understandable. But when it comes to this issue, not such a great thing.
No, especially the way that it breaks the ethics.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody talks about first do no harm, which is, you know, a great statement, but you also have to realize that along with that, people are really not paying attention that you're looking at cutting a completely healthy child to prevent something that there is no guarantee they're going to get.
Yep.
That would be, as I wrote in a tweet earlier today, that would be just like saying that all girls should have mastectomies just to prevent breast cancer if there might have been a chance.
Yeah.
It's ludicrous.
Yeah, they hear from the doctor, oh, it reduces chances of UTIs, STDs, and penile cancer. They don't tell you, well, it's here. You only have like 1 in 100 chance or 1 in 11 chance, something like that, of the UTI for a male. Anyways, well, girls get 9 times many, and STDs. Yeah, and you have antibiotics, and you have other ways to treat it. And STDs, well, there's, what, less than 10% chance that you're going to get an STD, and the change of that is small in the first place, and you don't have any idea what kind of sexual activities your child is going to grow up to have. They might just end up having one partner their entire life and be happy, and or might choose safe sex practices, or might just choose to use condoms, and your baby isn't going to have sex, right? So you can wait
hopefully
until
not, no.
What's that?
I said hopefully not.
Yeah, so they can wait until they're old enough to decide for themselves whether they want to play it risky, and whether they think that cutting off part of the penis will reduce the chances, right? So that doesn't make any sense. And then penile cancer, 1 in 1,000 lifetime chance of ever getting it.
Even the
you might not even live that long.
Yeah, even the American Cancer Society came out and said that circumcision is not a recommended prevention for it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anyone actually recommends doing this, right? From a medical standpoint. All right, so we have lots of medical professionals that are involved in the movement. I've got dozens of pictures of doctors and nurses and all that speak out against it. And you've got like Marilyn Milos, who got fired from her job because she was trying to educate people, and they would get upset, and it's like, well, it's not her job, or it's not because of her that they're getting upset. Don't shoot the messenger. So yeah, so lots of medical professionals in our movement have testified to, they've shown their emotions and all that about this, and their struggle with dealing with this going on in their field. And then we have parents like you and I. I came, super close to allowing my son to be cut, and the thought of that just makes me sick that, I could be sitting here right now with my oldest child permanently harmed, just like me. From this.
I do believe that they should make all parents watch a circumcision before they decide whether or not, and that they should be well informed on the risks and what it used to be to fit, that it used to stand for.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, there's a 100% risk. The boy's not going to have his prep use.
Yeah.
Right. There is definitely a 100% risk of harm in this. So, yeah, it torques me off that my wife's OB didn't offer any information at all on this. I don't consider that informed consent.
Yeah. Luckily, the hospital that we went to, once we said no, they never asked us again. In fact, they were very educated, and you'll be surprised, possibly it was Johns Hopkins Bayview, because I know that they had something printed out about melostenosis, but then they retracted it because they didn't want people to know that that was a possible harm. But when we went there and we told them, and I even had the little like rubber bands on his leg that says "Do not retract, do not cut."
Yeah, awesome.
And I think those are still by Your Whole Baby too.
Mm-hmm.
They said, "Oh, we don't push the issue. We're not going to push it. We understand people's feelings on this, and we're not going to force you." So
good to hear. Yeah, or come in and take your baby away and just do it without.
Right. I've heard the horror stories of that.
Yeah. If you don't mind, how many years ago was this?
This was actually, let's see, 15 months ago.
Okay, so fairly recently. I'm hoping that it's these medical professionals are becoming more and more aware, and especially the newer generation of medical professionals going into the hospitals are seeing this for what it is.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see if I can somehow get a grant from Hopkins, see if I can figure a way out on whether or not I can get a grant to help me in this fight, and see where I can go from there.
For sure. Yeah, I went to a local hospital myself and went in and asked to speak with the house supervisor and had a little chat with in a conference room, and told him who I was and that I'd like to make a partnership with them or whatever to try to improve the situation. Of course, they never responded to me months later, and well, they ended up getting me protesting in front of their place a couple times. So, yeah, it would be really nice if they would work with us and maybe come up with ways to satisfy what we want instead of just ignoring us. Okay, then there's intact men, I need to cut off that men part. Intact individuals. Because I can imagine if there's a woman in a culture where female circumcision or katana is normal, it would probably be the same sort of thing. They probably feel shamed by the culture, by the society around them for not being cut.
Yeah, I mean, there is that one video on YouTube of the Egyptian women talking about how, oh yeah, she's not harmed. I took her, I did this and all this, and they sound just like the American men who take their sons to get cut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a playlist on YouTube from Cliteria Nipples that has a whole bunch of documentary videos on it, and you could spend a few days or so just watching these videos. And after you've heard, after you've been an advocate for male genital autonomy long enough, and you start watching these and all that, it's like, man, everything sounds exactly the same. And then you start listening also to the intersex side of it all, and it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, they really have all the same reasons.
I actually had an intersex person today on Twitter tell me not to lump them in with the fight against genital mutilation, because it's not the same, because it's society forcing a gender on them. I'm like, but it's a surgery you don't absolutely need. That's where I'm coming in.
Yeah. Non-therapeutic, non-consensual that's what's common amongst all three of them.
Yeah.
So I haven't had, that's interesting. I should probably try to find that tweet, but for the most part, intersex people have been happy to
screenshot it and send it to you.
Okay, be part of this, of the whole genital autonomy thing. I'm part of 3 Facebook groups. They've welcomed me. I've been involved on conference calls amongst intersex people, and they're all happy to say, yeah, we'll work with you or whatever.
Yeah, I know of at least one person in the that I've met that is intersex and fights along with us. And I'm not going to out them because I don't know if
I know who you're talking about. They protest often, and
yes,
isn't really private about it. So yeah. In fact, they told me, I think it was either them that told me about their situation, or going to genitalautonomyamerica.org that really got me digging into the intersex side of it more.
Yeah, I think it was one of the GIAWs that I met them and they told me.
Interesting.
And they're really cool people.
Yeah. Yeah. Hida Valoria is a well-known author in the movement, in the group. Hida is also on the GA America website, and has had multiple interviews about her book and stuff. So, and then there's 7 Graham too, a very interesting story. But yeah, intact individuals are, clearly, whether they get bullied in school or shamed in other ways, or you just feel bad about the fact that they have all their genitalia while their buddies, whatever, do not. They're harmed by this too.
Yeah,
that's the whole point here. And then the last psychological effects are on advocates for genital autonomy or intactivists. It's traumatizing to do this. As advocates, we go out sometimes purposefully looking for people that need to be educated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And quite often we run into their cognitive dissonance. In fact, I keep saying that it's multiple layers of cognitive dissonance. It's not just one layer. And sometimes willful ignorance. They don't want to know.
I mean, I know there have been some that have gotten death threats. There have been some who have actually been assaulted. Mm-hmm. There's one, I can't remember his name right now, but he used to go to like areas that were very populated, like near conventions and all that, had a sign up, had a GoPro, and I know I've worked with him before.
You might be speaking of Mo Love. He got assaulted.
Yeah, Mo Love. It's been a while since I've seen him or seen anything of from him.
Same here.
And all the videos that he has where he shows people, verbally attacking him, even trying to come after him, and
the one video I saw, he was being physically assaulted by a veteran, a military guy, and I'm like, really? That's a military guy is fighting for our rights to freedom of speech, and
Yeah.
all of our other rights that are covered in the Bill of Rights, in our Constitution, and you're going and attacking this guy for trying to stop people from cutting children's genitals? Wow. Uh, yeah. So I think of advocates for genital autonomy as warriors in themselves. They might not be risking life and limb as much, but they're risking something that's also very important.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think
Sanity.
some people would rather risk life and limb over risking loss of connection with their community. Right.
Yeah, earlier I said our sanity, but I mean, the point is, it is exhausting,
Yeah.
especially when people refuse to even research what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I've actually had people tell me that they don't need to research it because this person has already done it. I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Unless you absolutely see it for yourself, you cannot say that it's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that people look at me when I mention Kellogg and his connection, and they're like, the cereal guy. I'm like, yeah, the cereal guy.
Yep.
But
the same exact guy. Yeah. It's a puzzle in itself, trying to figure out how to get through people's cognitive dissonance on this. How to get people to take an honest look at the topic. I still haven't figured it out. I just know that there's multiple layers of cognitive dissonance. You've got your, I've been cut and I'm fine. You got I cut my children and they're fine. I'm a doctor and I've been trained that it's, this is something that's normally cut off. And
yeah,
can't really tell you anything more about it, but that's what I've been taught.
there's also the fact that most of the medical books don't even show a intact,
Yeah.
penis.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last is the religious folks. If you got all four of those, wow, that's really hard to bust through to get people to listen to all of those. But you were talking about the medical books, and I recently, this last year, I went through a urology book that was edited for 2020. So there was a new edition, and I picked it apart. There were so many things that just disgusted me. I mean, it's like very biased toward. I mean, it just kept pushing the urologist in several areas towards circumcising, and they use the word circumcision. It's like, why don't you guys get off of this euphemism, this word that really, when you look
call
at
it
it,
amputation, or don't butter, don't make it up with cutesy sounding things.
Yeah. It's be honest. You don't use that kind of word for anything else when you're removing any other part. It's it's a preputial amputation, or at the very least a posthectomy. Right? At least that's a word. I don't know where the word post comes from, but ectomy is normal. It's like I got an appendectomy, so that makes sense. Use something similar to that. You're removing a body part permanently. So be honest. Okay. Any other thoughts about how intactivists are psychologically impacted by all this?
Well, I mean, all the work that we have to put into it, all the backlash, and I mean, it does weigh on you.
Yeah.
There have been times when I've been told I should just leave the internet for a week because I get so involved and I get so heated over things because people just don't want to, understand. They will not look at it in the same way as other things.
Yeah.
And I've actually had someone block me the other day, which apparently other activists have had, been blocked by this person because they don't want to listen.
Yeah.
But I mean, it does weigh on you, especially when people do try to push the religious side of it, and you're like, well, if you're going to say one religion has the right to do it, then all religions have to have the right to do it.
Yeah.
If you're going to say, I mean, I even quote, Galatians chapter 5, verse 2 and 3, where it says that you should not circumcise.
Yeah.
And I actually have people going, that's not in the Bible. I'm like, you've got a smartphone, look it up. Oh, well, that's not what that means.
Yeah, and it's in several other places too. But I personally, I avoid even getting into the debate about the religious side of it, and just say, okay, no matter what you might think, at the bottom of this, I'm a fan of religious freedom, and mine, it was stomped on when I was an infant, and I'm stuck with it my entire life. It's not going to go away.
Yeah, when people start talking about how it's part of religion, I'm like, well, that's great, but it should be the person whose body is being cut to make that decision, not the parents. I mean, there was a great, and I know this is going to sound anti-religious, but there's a great saying that if it's not pounded into you at birth, religion would have died out a long time ago.
Indoctrination. But as you and I both know, there's plenty of people that are like Jewish that are involved in this.
Mm-hmm. There's both Jewish and Muslim people who are looking to fight to change it.
Yep.
I mean, with the let's see, what was it? Beyond the Bris, the Brit Shalom.
Yep. BritShalom.info is one place where you can go find people that do Brit Shalom instead. Beyond the Bris is a book, but you can go to the website too. And then there's Eliu Ungar Sagan. He goes by Eli. He did the documentary called Cut, Slicing Through the Myths of Circumcision. Kind of spendy.
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, it's kind of spendy to buy, but I got lucky and got to watch it in Seattle. Eli actually showed up in Seattle and had a screening of it many years ago. So, and he happens to be in the LA area too. I haven't had a chance to meet him in person yet, but okay. So then the next section is about relationships. We have kind of recovered what goes on with advocates, but let's start off with the child-parent trust aspect to this. I think that the child's trusting of the parent starts going downhill right away as soon as you let that child be taken away from you to be cut.
I actually have a poem about that if I can find it, I'll send it to you.
Oh, sweet.
It might be somewhere on my campaign. Pain and Betrayal welcomed us, I think is the name of it.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
Okay.
I put this up over a year ago. And it's my vision of what happened from when I was born to the time I was returned to my mother after being circumcised.
Okay.
I
might have seen it. Cool. Looking forward to seeing that. It's great. But yeah, child's taken away from mom, no more skin-to-skin contact, and then it's being put on a table or whatever. It gets cold, gets uncomfortable, maybe starts crying. No one does anything to console the child. Child starts feeling pain, screaming. No one does anything about it. And then again, child comes back to mom and is feeling the pain from down there for a week or two, and actually maybe even longer. I recently had a discussion with someone else, and she talked about the Plastibell and how it falls off after a week or so.
Right.
And it occurred to me, it's like, okay, well, with the Plastibell, it's staying on, so the glands is actually staying protected for a while. So it's not building up a layer to protect itself, and then it falls off. So instead of a shorter recovery time where the glands is exposed and it starts building up that layer right away, there's this recovery time where it's feeling pain from other parts of the cut, and then the Plastibell comes off, and then the glands is exposed, and now it's feeling another set of pain for a certain period of time until that builds up.
Right.
And then there's in many cases where the child goes to the parent, and the parent, dismisses the child or denies that any harm's done or whatever. And well, that definitely destroys child-parent trust relationships.
I mean, some of the things that we see as intactivists, like the excuses given as to why it's done. And I mean, you've got mothers who proclaim they would never do anything with a man who was not cut, and therefore they're going to cut their son for their future spouses. And any child that sees that later on in life, you gotta wonder what their thought of is going to be when when they see that.
Anyways, being a parent myself, trust between myself and my children is really important. I want my children to trust me and feel free to talk to me and all that. So, and then we have co-parenting, another relationship dynamic that goes on, particularly when two parents don't necessarily agree on the topic.
Right.
It'd be nice if everyone talked about it before they started having kids, but sometimes this sort of thing leads to divorces.
Yeah.
And I want to shout out to James and Jessica Rigdon for sharing their stories, because it was a very difficult thing for them to work through. And then there's the mother-child bond. There's lots of thoughts about like the child needing to have skin-to-skin contact after birth and breastfeeding and all that. So if the child's being taken away, especially shortly after, that kind of breaks the bond. And then when the child comes back and it's not able to feed or it's lethargic, out of it, or whatever, well, that definitely doesn't help create that bond either.
Just to let you know, in a second, I'll be saying goodnight to my son because it's his bedtime.
Okay. We're nearing the end here. Pedophilia is another aspect to ritual genital cutting all across the board. I made a recent connection between ritual genital cutting and forced marriages. As far as I'd love for someone to point out something different here, but as far as I can tell, forced marriages of young girls to older men only occurs in cultures where ritual genital cutting is also occurring. So is that a pedophile thing? I don't know. Then there's also stories I've heard where nurses have identified that a guy that was doing the cutting ended up getting an erection during the cutting.
There's actually books on circumcision fetishes. There's actually books out on I think it was Amazon that have circumcision as the fetish in their erotica. And that, I mean, I don't want to kink shame anyone.
Yeah.
But that just seems really weird to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have another theory that I came up with. I did a short little video on it. I suddenly made a connection one day that, there seems to be this growing trend of women getting labiaplasty and reconstructive surgery on their vaginas to make their vaginas tighter. I've also seen, like in movies, where women talk about doing their Kegels to make things tighter for their man or whatever. Well, the general thought is, some argue with me on this, but the general thought is that younger women have tighter vaginas.
You're about to meet a member of the intact generation.
Awesome.
Come on. This is my son, Devlin.
Hi, Devlin.
Say hi.
Hi, buddy.
Oh,
What a cutie.
all right. Go to mama.
Come here. Come on.
You wouldn't happen to be on any of the dads groups on Facebook, would you?
No, but I'm on Daddit on Reddit.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I should
Sometimes-
probably get into the dad ones.
Yeah, just take a picture of you and your son and say hashtag intact generation or something to see what happens. The arguments really get heated sometimes in those groups. So
I can bet, because I've seen what people have posted about the crunchy mamas
Yeah.
and all that.
yeah, I think I've been kicked out of one or two of those dads groups. Oh well. Yeah, just trying to spread the truth, you guys. But yeah. Okay, yeah. So the pedophilia. So the idea here is that if men are missing a large chunk of their sensitive erogenous tissue on the penis, then what they have left is just pressure, right? And squeezing, so that'd just be another reason for a man to pursue a young woman or girl, right? So again, it's just a theory, nothing scientifically proven or anything like that, but I think it's a plausible theory. And then we have the doctor-patient relationships. Personally, I couldn't have a doctor that was my doctor that performed, the least of all, performed the procedure, but even condoned the thing or promoted it. I just, as far as I'm concerned, if they can break that ethic, then what ethic are they going to break when it comes to taking care of me?
I actually tried to get a hold of the hospital that I was born to find out who it was that did mine, because I wanted to lodge a complaint about how it harmed me.
Yeah.
And I've gotten no responses back. And I don't know if maybe it's because it's a naval hospital or because maybe the person's dead.
You're in a naval hospital too?
Cherry Point, North Carolina.
Whidbey Island, NAS. Yep. Yeah. I don't know if you know, but I did. I filed a tort claim against them, and also took it to federal court.
I would if I could. I don't have the funds right now.
I understand. Well, a tort claim doesn't cost anything, but I don't. I mean, you're probably not going to get anywhere, but just filing it raises awareness with them, right?
Yeah.
And the more that they get these claims, the more they're going to say, well, maybe we should stop doing this. And one of the more recent things I've done is reached out to the Inspector General's office and sent them a letter saying, hey, you guys shouldn't be doing this because this is a violation of, it's a waste of federal tax money. It's not therapeutic. It's not needed. It's not important. In fact, it's harmful. But yeah, never really heard much of anything back on that. But you know what you might want to do too. Well, if it's a naval hospital, I don't know if it would work this way. But with other hospitals, even though I wasn't born at these other hospitals, I call hospitals and say, hey, I'd like to file a formal complaint. Can you pass me to whoever would do that? And I wait for a little while, and then they pass me to someone, and then I start talking to them about how I'm a man that complains. I'm a man that's not happy that it was done to me, and I just want to make sure you guys are aware of it. And here's all the reasons why. And they just listen. I don't know whether they're writing it down or not, but it's at least getting to one person's ears, and chances are it'll probably go somewhere else.
It always gets me when I hear people say, well, I've never heard a man complain. I'm like, have you researched to see if men complain?
Yeah.
And a lot of times this is after I have just complained. I'm like, well, I just complained to you.
Yeah.
And you're already saying that you've never heard a man complain.
Yep.
And one of the other responses I usually get is, oh, well, you were just botched. Well, to me, a botch is when you consented to the surgery and the surgery went wrong.
Yeah.
This was a surgery that was pushed upon me by social standards and fraudulent medical theory.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
I was a completely healthy child. Well, I had hernias, but hernias didn't have anything to do with the foreskin.
Nope.
But there was no absolute reason for the surgery.
No.
So.
Yeah. You can search hashtag men do complain or hashtag I am not thankful. There's also I did not consent.
I could have sworn there was also a Facebook group, men do complain.
Yes, there is. I created it.
I actually commented, look up, Facebook literally has men do complain.
Yeah. Yep. Circumcised men complain. Yep. And there's hundreds of members in that group. So, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that was a doctor-patient relationship. Then there's the friends and family, and you also tag into their coworkers if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's particularly here in the USA, speaking out about this creates rifts between family members and friends. I've had plenty of people block me on Facebook. I've had one family member block me on Instagram, even though I don't hardly do much of anything there. I just it's pretty sad that your own friends and family aren't interested in hearing.
Yeah, I've been lucky on that. The only ones that had the problem with me speaking about circumcision were my parents. And to be really honest, my father really didn't have an issue because after I told him that it harmed me, he kind of understood.
Yeah.
But my mother, who I will say this right now, was a huge narcissist. When I told her and remember, I told you earlier that my family didn't like to speak about anything sexual.
Yeah.
Her response was, well, why didn't you come to me? We could have sued the doctor and we could have gotten money. And my thought on that was, wait a minute, you're wanting to get money for a decision that you made that caused me pain instead of getting justice.
Yeah.
And I've had family members who say that they did it because they didn't know better and that they regret doing it. I've have friends who are close enough, like family, that because of my advocacy have understood and refused to do it to their children.
Yeah.
But so far I haven't had anyone block me or unfriend me or just cut connections with me yet that I know of.
Yeah. When you talk about about your mom talking about suing the doctor, it's like, well, according to the statute of limitations, probably won't have been able to do it past like age 2.
No, actually you can do it up until about your 20th year, from what I understand from
that's
Llewellyn.
That's if you sue from age 18.
Okay.
So the challenge is I created a page to try to attract young men on this, but it hasn't worked out like I hoped. But I created a page called Circumcised Teen Males, and I sorted the page out in a way that tries to educate people bit by bit by bit by bit, so they come out realizing the harm, and hopefully, but before they turn 18, and then when they're 18, or even before they're 18, they might be able to start assembling a case by getting some research done to get records or whatever. But at 18 or day of 18, file that court case, right? Because you don't have very much time to go through a case and go through it. What I tried to do is I tried to claim equitable tolling, and I basically said, well, I didn't know about the harm. I didn't know that I was actually harmed until so far along, and the equitable tolling is supposed to reset the clock on that, but it didn't really make all that matter. And honestly, I don't think that it should be considered a medical practice in the first place. Just because a medical professional did it doesn't mean that it's a medical practice.
Right.
Right. Particularly one that's not, particularly one that is allowable to be done just because a parent consents to it.
Right.
So as far as I'm concerned, it's sexual battery of a minor, and those kind of things don't have the same statute of limitations. I mean, if the Boy Scouts of America can get sued for something that happened years and years ago.
I mean, I also have that one button in my car that genital cutting is not a parental right. And I've actually had people say that they agree with that. And then I've had one person say, well, I'm glad you feel that, girls shouldn't be cut. I'm like, that's not just about girls. Yeah. And then they give me a quizzical look like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's disturbing when it's it's disturbing, but not always completely surprising because people have been convinced that it's good for males. But yeah, it's just like clipping fingernails.
Yeah.
Or like one
grow back.
Yeah, or one doctor, supposedly a doctor, met the bloodstained men and argued with them for I don't know how long and said, "Oh, it's like dealing with their cuticle, a hangnail." Gosh, you are a doctor? That's scary.
Somebody, take his license away.
Yeah, it was a woman actually, but
or her license away.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've also protested ACOG with
sweet.
with Brother K, and it's amazing how many of the gynecologists don't believe that their profession does circumcisions.
Yeah.
I've actually had a few on video yell at me, well, why don't you take it up with the doctors? They're the ones that do it. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like it varies too from I think it's like almost a state by state thing or whatever. Like in Washington State, it seems like it's done very less. It doesn't happen very often in hospitals, but it does happen in clinics. And when it happens with clinics, it's with pediatricians. So OBs don't do it typically.
Right.
And then other places, it's like, well, OBs are more common, maybe because hospitals are willing to do it because it's covered under insurance or whatever. Yeah. I know Washington State, for example, is one of the states that doesn't cover underneath the state insurance. So.
Yeah, it really annoys me, all the GoFundMes I see for parents trying to get their sons circumcised.
Yeah.
I actually tried to get my my campaign funded on GoFundMe, and more people were interested in funding circumcision than they were, a fight against, fight for human rights.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thankfully, your whole baby and Bloodstained Men, they are raising some funds, particularly for those billboards and stuff like that. So
I actually got my picture taken next to one on 95 in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania.
Sweet. I don't imagine there'll be one over here in California anytime soon because of the low cut rates, but okay, so yeah, that was friends and family and coworkers. I actually know one guy that got kicked off the Lyft platform because he talked about the subject.
Oh, I've on Lyft, I've got like a 4.87, I think, and on Uber, I have a 4.91.
Sweet.
And I think the only ones that I have the low scores because of were people who said, "Oh, don't worry, we're all adults. I don't think we'll have a problem with it." And then all of a sudden, I'll get the low rating, and that subject matter is something that you need to consider when you talk to your customers.
Yeah. Yeah, I have the stickers and stuff, and I don't bring it up until they bring it up, and then it's like,
Yeah, I
okay,
also
well,
have the
you're the
elephant
one
in
that
the
brought it up,
hospital.
so
I also have the elephant in the hospital sticker on the back of my car.
sweet. Yeah, about, that's something that'll make people ask, well, what is that all about? Well, okay, so the next major topic is about FGM, and I also include intersex normalization surgeries in this. And I actually did a poll on Twitter not too long ago, and I think mostly genital autonomy people follow me, so it wasn't too surprising. But most everyone agrees that FGM will continue as long as MGM continues, or it's definitely a major barrier to ending FGM.
Yeah, I've said that too, because as I said earlier, you're going to have people going, well, you allow this, so why don't you allow this?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was you that shared it, but in on Twitter today, somebody was posting about how in Malaysia, they're trying to find a medical benefit and use that as reasons for allowing FGM there.
Yeah. So all these people that have been saying all this time, well, there's no medical benefit to female circumcision. Like, well, don't tie don't tie it to that, because that's just a reason for them to find a reason.
Yeah.
I'm sure that if you remove that labia, you're probably going to reduce chances of vulvar cancer.
Or so much of the smegma buildup, because that's the other thing that people don't understand. They keep talking about smegma and calling it dick cheese and all that, when they don't realize that women also produce smegma. It's the body's natural byproduct of cleaning itself in those areas.
Yeah, he always smells. He's intact, so he always smells. And cut men don't ever smell. It's like, have you ever smelled a vagina?
Yeah. I've said that before myself. I'm like, not every vagina smells rosy.
Yeah. There is I guess a UN tweet recently, and some people jumped onto there and talked about MGM too and all that. And
I know exactly what you're talking about, the Zero Tolerance Day.
Yeah.
The International Day of Zero Tolerance.
That was yesterday, wasn't it? Or no, Saturday.
It was the 6th.
Yeah, just a couple days ago. So definitely a lot of new tweets about that. Orchid Project they did their tweets and stuff like that too.
That's okay. Right now, UN Women is getting a lot of people angry at them for their animation that they have, talking about ending FGM. It has like a flower on the bottom or something on the bottom that looks almost like a cross, and all of a sudden a dagger comes down and just stabs it. And people are like, "That's not a good no." They're like, "That's not right." And I can see where they get angry about that animation.
I hear this term conflate comes up multiple times whenever this topic, male circumcision, intersects with other issues, and not just female genital cutting or intersex genital cutting, but even we've been blocked by some pride events because some people think that we're conflating the issue with gay rights and stuff like that. It's like, no, it intersects, it overlaps. It's about self-determination, stuff like that, right? That's what pride is about.
I mean, there's a lot of people that talk about derailing, that talks about FGM or decentering.
Yeah.
And my argument to them is, well, this is something that affects boys, girls, and intersex.
Yeah.
On the most basic level, and this is something that we can all fight together. So why don't we do that? Why do we have to segregate it by gender?
Because they're afraid. They're afraid that it's going to reduce the success that they have at reducing FGM. And I think it's actually quite the opposite. I think that attacking it on a non-sexist basis will actually strengthen the overall movement for genital autonomy.
I completely agree.
I've got these images of people protesting FGM and people protesting intersex surgeries and people protesting male circumcision. And if you were to take all those people and put them all together all at one time, the size it would just be so much more impactful, right? So I think there's plenty of women in this movement that see that too.
I've met a lot of cool women that love the protests. As I said, I've done ACOG, I've done genital intact integrity awareness week.
Mhm.
I've done a few other ones that that were in the areas.
Mhm.
And I mean, I've met a lot of cool people who were really awesome, and a lot of women who were very passionate about this.
Me too. Yeah, I joined Blonde State Men up in Vancouver, BC, 2 days out of 3 that they were up there. Yeah. Yeah. I wish would have had more time over the past year. Well, before this last year, before the pandemic, but I still would have joined them. Okay. Then there's a social productivity aspect of this, and the first thought is that if the moils and the butchers and whoever that wasn't cutting children's genitals and instead were out, I don't know, solving cancer or building houses or helping feed
Focusing
people
on something else that would better push society in the right direction.
Yeah, contribute in a more positive way, for sure. And then there's guys like you and I, Walter, that are spending so many hours every day trying to educate people. What would you be doing instead? Right?
Probably reading more. I don't know. But going along with like the moils and all, I actually had a woman in my car one time who was Jewish, and we were talking about this, and I was letting her know that I am not against the religion, just that one practice.
Yeah.
And I even asked her, I said, well, what do you think about the Metzitza Bepa? I don't even know if I said it right. And she was like, the what? I'm like, really? And I explained to her what that is. She goes, oh my God, that's so disgusting. I'm like, but it's an ultra-Orthodox Jewish ritual.
Yeah.
And it's allowed to happen because it's religious.
Yeah.
And she was like, but that's just so wrong. I'm like, yeah, well, a lot of babies have contracted herpes because of it. A lot of babies have actually died because of it or have become disabled.
Brain damage.
But it's been allowed. And I mean, there have been talks about finding moils that know they have herpes and all that and still perform it. But this is what happens. And she said that she was going to go ahead and research that. So even some within their own culture don't even know about everything that goes on.
Oh, for sure.
And working on this does take up a lot of time, as you said. Honestly, I'd probably be more of a gamer right now than I really am. And my daughter trying to be sneaky off to the side.
Yeah.
No, I've already talked about you and how you come here.
Is she a gamer?
She plays Skyrim and Oblivion and Minecraft. As I said, she also agrees that it's wrong.
Sweet. Thank you for speaking out.
Hopefully she can come to some protests with me in the future.
I'd love to.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
So
yeah, I could see myself playing video games with my sons more often.
Yeah, I try, even when I have downtime in the car, which actually is very rare nowadays. I would, go on Twitter and try and educate, or go on Facebook and educate. I feel bad because I also said I was going to start doing videos, and I haven't done a video in about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
So,
One thing I'd like to do is I like to, the pandemic's making this difficult right now, but I'd like to go take my boys out to go-kart driving more, because the oldest actually, he's 15 and not too far off of 16.
yeah,
He hasn't been asking to be able to drive, but
if it's out there where you are, look up Autobahn.
I think I've gone to one in Memphis, Tennessee, on Audubon.
Yeah, I used to be security, and I was security at one of them. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I love doing that. I probably would have been a decent race car driver if I would have done that instead of getting into computers. But yeah, fast.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the very last thing, I added this more recently to my interviews, is about forced retraction and the harm that causes. We talked about earlier, but just want to recover that this happens. This thing happens because people it's become such a normal thing to see circumcised or previously amputated penises, and no one, so very few people know how to take care of the intact penis,
and the doctors don't know, because they themselves don't keep up on the techniques of care for intact.
Yeah. So so it leads to harm that's just very scary, and it part of me wants to fix that before we go forward with stopping people from cutting children's genitals in the first place, but because that's very scary.
When I talk about it in my car, I'm like, this is the problem, and I explain about the connective tissue. I talk about how naturally over time it dissolves itself, and I'm like, if you pull back, what you're causing is you're ripping it from the glands, and you're causing, what could be infections. And one woman was like, I never thought about it like that. I'm like, yeah, have you ever broke a nail and pulled a nail back? She goes, yeah, that's pretty much what you're doing, because it's almost like it's the same connective tissue.
Yeah.
And when I say it like that, they go, it clicks in their mind, oh crap. Yeah. I'm like, and a lot of doctors nowadays will be like, well, this is why we tell you to circumcise, because look, now it's injured. And they're not going to let them know that they told them how to injure it.
Yeah.
I've actually seen posts about doctors who told parents how to injure the penis so that they can get medical insurance to actually pay for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because suddenly there's a medical indication. Yeah. Yeah. Very sad. Okay, Walter, I don't have that's the end of the list. You got any other thoughts or ideas on the topic?
No. I would like to ask, if possible, if I can share this on my page and all.
Oh, absolutely. Please.
When you put up. And once I get the chance, I'll try and find that stuff for you and send it to you.
Okay.
Or tag you in it.
Yeah, I'm going to send you, I'll get you that lawsuit against AAP that's going on.
Okay.
So you can jump onto that webpage, share your story, and just let them know. So you can go to the webpage and put in your name and address, and so they can send you email updates, stuff like that.
Okay.
So they actually, the people that are running that did this lawsuit, they've been working with David Llewellyn. They made a presentation yesterday at the bodyguards meeting, which I don't know if you've heard about it. It's an international coalition against. It used to be called ICAS, an International Coalition Against Sexual Mutilation, but they changed it to the bodyguards because They wanted to be
Yeah.
a little more inviting to people that don't see it as mutilation.
Gotcha. Because I understand that. I've actually had people yell and scream at me when I use the word mutilation.
Yeah.
And if I said, female genital circumcision or cutting, they'll yell at me and say, "Oh, it's mutilation." And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Swing the pendulum from one side to another. Yeah.
but yeah, as soon as I get off of here, I'll try and find you that tweet of the intersex person telling me don't lump them in.
Yeah.
And I'll try and send you that poem that I wrote a while back.
Okay.
I don't even know if I can call it a poem. It's basically just a short story.
Yeah.
But
I'd love to see it. That's awesome. Okay, Walter, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this.
it was my honor.
All right, man.
All
Have a
right.
great night.
All right, you too.
Bye.